Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy is sponsored by Thomson Reuters, providing legal professionals with the intelligence, technology, and human expertise they need to find trusted answers. Products include Westlaw, Practical Law, and Firm Central legal practice management software for small law firms. Thomson Reuters, the answer company. Online at thomsonreuters.com. Access to Democracy is made possible in part by a donation from Firefly Credit Union. Firefly is the new name of U.S. Federal Credit Union, which has proudly served the financial needs of the Greater Twin Cities community since 1925. At Firefly, we guide our members forward and give them the power to chase dreams by delivering the financial solutions they need to get ahead. From checking accounts to mortgages, we'll light the way. We are Firefly Credit Union, and this is Life Illuminated. And Dr. Charles Crutchfield of award-winning Crutchfield Dermatology in Eagan, acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. A Minnesota native who trained at the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Crutchfield personally treats all patients and states that experience counts and quality matters. Crutchfield Dermatology. Look good, feel great, with beautiful skin.
Welcome. Access to Democracy returns. Alan Miller hosting. A return guest, although much to my surprise, I just realized he hasn't been here in 2 years. Professor Wy Spano. And Wy has been with us over a dozen years, I guess.
Yep.
And just moved his teaching from Duluth to Metro State. So why don't you tell us about that? You have a very unique program that you teach for advocacy in politics and ethics.
You're right, advocacy and political leadership. We moved from Duluth, at least in part because most of our students were coming from the Twin Cities and having to go up to Duluth. But another big benefit when you're teaching, as we do, people, particularly young people, who want to change the world and they need to understand how the world works and how the political system works, it's really important that you have a lot of students of color. You just need, because those are the folks who really want to make those changes. And at Metro State, you get that in a really nice way. So we've doubled and more the numbers of students of color that we put through our program. It's a limited cohort model program. We don't do any online courses. They're all together, and
I'm in favor of that.
and we just, we figure you can't. I figure you can't teach advocacy when you're not sort of talking to somebody. I mean, that's at the end you got to get there.
Being a live advocate.
Right. So we've loved being down here, and Metro State's a great place, and growing now, and doing some new stuff with their new president, Ginny Arthur, who will really, I think the community's going to start to notice this place a lot more.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. What we need is more dedicated young advocates in politics. And all we have to do is look around locally. I mean, I thought until yesterday that we were going to have a special session. We have a governor who is a progressive advocate, who wants to improve the lives of people here, and it blew up yesterday. The possibility of a special, well, first place, we shouldn't have needed a special session. It should have, the whole agenda should have been completed during the regular session.
Right.
But it wasn't. Then it looked like a special session, and now it looks like the Republicans, particularly led by this young man, Doubt, and I have a lot of doubt about him, blew up the special session. So tell us what's happening.
Well, in that particular case, it was, we talked off camera about lamented, like Ty Berman, folks who came before and went historical. Now I'm sort of find myself doing that a lot. And we've gone the last, 20 years here in Minnesota in being slowly moved into having a lot of control by folks who really don't like any government, and they really don't want anything done, and they really don't want to spend any money on it.
Except when their ox is gored.
Right, but kind of the general tenor is always, we can't do that. And so in this particular case, I think politically the story has been sold to the Republicans think that the story has been sold to the outstate areas, that in fact these trains in the Twin Cities are a boondoggle, unnecessary, should not be done. And I think Speaker Doubt just made a kind of a political calculation and said, we're going to be better off if we can run against spending that extra money than we would if we approved it.
Now, the extra money almost precludes us getting $900 million from the federal government to put into that particular light rail situation, where our contribution would have been, I think, less than $200 million. It, to me, is a no-brainer when we have seen how the burgeoning of light rail has affected the communities that it touches now. I remember debating with former Governor Pawlenty right here, well, in our other studio a few years ago. And he was saying that it's going to be a money loser, and we're throwing our money away, and the whole Republican line. And I said, no, just the contrary. We got the blue line. He was there to cut the tape.
Right.
I wasn't invited. That always hurt. But the blue line has turned into so much more than they anticipated in terms of value and revenue to the state. Now the green line seems to be doing the same thing. How you can hold on to archaic, really thoughts and principles in the face of facts is beyond me.
Yeah, I don't get that one. But Speaker Dowd, of course, said that he believed that the local governments involved could come up with the money and make the match. And I really don't know, but I think that the legislature will have time when it meets in January to get the match to Washington themselves. And so hopefully that can be done.
It can be done particularly if we have a new power in the legislature.
Right.
If, in fact, the House goes Democratic, which would be certainly essential, and the Senate remains Democratic, as long as we have the governor.
Yeah. And that seems to me, at any rate, to be a more and more likely scenario because of the difficulty of the Trump campaign. And the fact that, as I've talked to a number of Republican folks, and excuse me, they're telling me that that it just more and more evident that this is hurting. You know, it's starting to feel its way down to the little campaigns, the smaller campaigns.
That's the only part of the Republican theory of trickle down that I like, is that a bad top of the head trickles down to the bottom, because it certainly hasn't been proven in terms of jobs and budget and creating things like that.
Somebody came up with, I think it was at the Democratic National Committee or someplace, they came up with the slogan, if Donald Trump is your standard bearer, where are your standards? And that's feeling seems to be starting to slip. But, you know, as we speak, it's still a number of days out, and things can change.
I think 79 or 80 days to go, and they're trying to put lipstick on the pig, to take Sarah Palin's expression, by toning Trump down. Now, his reading from teleprompters, which he swore he would not do, and which he made fun of other politicians who did, leaves him quite sterile. But there's somebody writing his material, and I personally think that they have him on some sort of medication to tone him down.
I don't know about that, but
but do you really think that he has a chance to win? I mean, we know 80 days is a long time in politics.
I guess I don't really think so. I've from the beginning in this thing, I've been telling friends and folks I'm talking to that I think this is going to be the biggest gap in really modern history. The difference between the Clinton final tally and Trump's tally. And
bigger than the Goldwater?
At least that much. And it may not be. I mean, you hear people saying that Texas, for instance, is something that's not gonna flip over. But I talked to somebody from Texas the other day, and they say it was. You know, that they're believing that. But it's so hard to get this race, your hands around it, because, I mean, let's be honest, there's just not a lot of enthusiasm on either side.
Right. And either way, I worry. I worry when I see the energy of the people at the Trump rallies. How many of these people are there in the country who are not interested in history or anything, particularly his history, which is so antagonistic to leadership, along with his personality? It does worry me.
Yeah, I don't know how many there are, but I do think you're onto something in the sense of, you know, I think about it this way. I run a program for basically idealistic young people who think they want to make the world better, and they want to understand they want to understand the place where the rules are made, so they can go change the rules to make life better for sometimes themselves, but most often just a broader group of people. The idealism and the feeling of doing something right, that's a really wonderful thing, important thing, and we have a slogan, for example, in the program: politics is how we care for each other. This is how we do it. You know, it's not politics is who gets what, when, where, and how. You know, that kind of definition. This is how we live together. Well, when you get a whole strain of things going on where that's so violated, the whole idea is so, and it reminds me of putting Breitbart guy in Bannon in charge of the campaign.
Who's reviled by Republicans and conservatives.
Right. I mean, those folks, it's really sewer journalism. And this is who's going to now help us elect the president. That to me is just, it makes my heart heavy to think about it.
I mean, I unabashedly made reference to the fact several times on the show that I supported Bernie Sanders from the very beginning. And that support only became more intense as things went on. Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, Wasserman Schultz, I called for her ouster months before she left. Simply because of that. But
well, you and all the other young folks.
All the other young folks. All the first-time voters. I saw no other solution, but I will quickly and did endorse Hillary as the only viable solution against a man who I believe is mentally disturbed.
Yeah, that there certainly is a way to think about Trump as at least for me, the most just classic narcissist almost ever seen. If I've read through a number of times long interviews with him, and it's amazing that no matter what question you ask, he can get it back to himself.
It comes back to him, yes.
It's like, it's almost uncanny ability to turn everything into how's this about me?
Well, we've had some insane geniuses in politics over the years. Generally, they end up not only bringing themselves down, but bringing down whoever they happen to be working for or with. And that worries me about this country.
Yeah, and I think Trump's going to lose. He's going to lose big, but he's going to leave with the Breitbart guy with that kind of stuff. He's going to leave a legacy, and we're going to be dealing with those kind of people for a very long time. If we have the most common scenario where the Republicans lose a number of seats in the House but don't quite lose the majority, we're going to spend 4 years of investigations of the president for past, for the future. It's just going to go on and on and on.
That's sort of a mark of Republican administrations.
Yeah, so it's just going to be so difficult to get out of this. And although the coming census is an important thing.
It certainly is.
Because that means who are we going to count? There's a lot of effort right now by many to try to stop counting a lot of people. For instance, the proposal to make the counting process all electronic so that you would send
which we see how possible, not possible, but really how dangerous that is
right.
in terms of hackers who have really hacked into the most serious and sensitive accounts that we have, including the NSA.
Right.
So one really has to be frightened at the thought of everything being electronic.
And the thought of sending a postcard to somebody and saying, okay, fill this out, give us your name and all that, and give it back to the government. For undocumented people, that's probably not going to happen.
Probably not.
And yet we have been counting, or should be counting undocumented people because the
They're here.
Constitution
They're living
says,
here. They've been here.
Right.
They've raised families here. It's multi-generational already, and there's no question about it. So, what about some of the races around the state, the congressional races?
well, I think certainly Terry Bonoff in the 3rd District, the DFL challenger, seems to have a very good chance. And again, though, it kind of depends on how far the effect goes. And speaking of that effect, it's to me at any rate, I've always been a Minnesota exceptionalist. I've always believed that we're in the spirit of Garrison Keillor, we're just a little bit smarter and better and like that.
Statistics back you up on that, though.
Right, that's true. But and we've done a slightly better job, but not enough, not as much as I'd like to, of hanging on to in our schools some element of civic education.
Bothers me no end. It's one of the things that I complained about in teaching, that not only civics, but history is we don't teach it, we don't learn it, and civics and the things that really, really are foundational for a good future for a student are now surpassed and supplanted by IT programs.
Right.
And that scares me. It scares me because we don't communicate anymore. It scares me because we have 140 characters is how we communicate on Twitter, and all of these other gimmicks, I call them, which I choose not to participate in, but that's age-related also.
You're right, right. Yeah,
I think in this district, we have a really interesting race with John Klein stepping down.
Right.
Angie Craig is an outstanding, intelligent, and passionate woman. And Jason Lewis is still living in the castle, drawing up the drawbridge and putting water in the moat. And he's really been the voice of some really frightening remarks over the years also in terms of his philosophy. So that's one I think we really have to watch. And
I just have no doubt that Angie's going to win that one.
Rick Nolan and Stuart Mills, who cut off his ponytail and said he's going to run an above-board campaign, and I've seen 2 really disgusting commercials from him. So much for that.
Right.
From another
right.
from another Trump backer.
Right.
And
you know the range probably gives a little bit more ability for a kind of a Trumpian appeal. You know, a lot of white males who don't have the jobs they used to have, that whole scenario.
Don't have the education that would have helped them no end.
Right, right. And yet, at least below the college level on the range, their education system was wonderful. You know, it really was great. And they did a very good job because they had some of the mining money. But anyway, I just think that I I think that race might be closer than Craig's race,
Really?
but I still think that Rick's going to win, but there'll be enough people up there who aren't so turned off by Trump like they will be in the second district, in a more urban area. I just think he's the kiss of death.
I am looking forward to the debates, if they go forward. If Trump doesn't say that he's not satisfied with the moderators and pull out, which is a distinct possibility, of him trying to go head to head with Hillary, and that's a no-brainer to me. I mean, I just see her doing really, really well against a man who has no credentials in politics, really in humanity. Certainly based on his track record, which is just abysmal.
Yeah. That's interesting. Which do you think is better for him, to pull out or to go on with it?
Well, based on his personality, and I don't think he will, because I think he has too much pressure on him right now, he would be better off pulling out than losing, because he can't deal with losing. And we see that, how he reacts to every remark that's made about him. But I think we have to face the fact that he's going to be there for the long haul. And I think that frightens him. And the thought that he might do well frightens me. So.
Well, to me, if I was running his campaign, or, Lord forbid, but the idea of him on the stage, there just isn't any other way for him to deal with somebody, is there, than you,
I don't think so.
Hag, you this, you that. And those kind of words toward a woman, I mean, she is a woman after all, that's going to just play real bad.
And I hope that women remember that when they vote. And I look forward to seeing him on the stage. Hopefully it's a stage heading toward Mexico. And the horses are going very, very rapidly. Well, we will see. And it's nice to know that you are closer to us now and more readily available than you were in Duluth. We've been talking with Professor Wy Spano, and now at Metro State, teaching young people really the way to get ahead in politics in a decent and a positive way. And I thank you so much for coming down and sharing with us once again. And now I'll pick on you a lot more often, because I know that you're much more available.
Okay, thank you.
We'll have to renew this one. Why, thanks so much.
Good to see you.